Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Reason We Learn. I'm fortunate enough to have our CommonCore Diva back again. It's been a while, Lynn. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Miss Deb?
I'm doing well. I've not had you on for a while, but I know you've been busy digging and
Busier than
digging.
yep, deep digging, busier than a one-arm paper hanger in a factory.
One arm paper. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so, one of the things I don't think our audience may have clued in on about us, we're both from North Carolina. We both live in North Carolina. You are really from here. You're native. I'm more of a transplant, some
No, I'm a
20.
transplant too.
Are you? I did not
Yep,
know that.
yep. My husband and family and I moved to North Carolina from Florida way back when in the dark ages. It was
Oh.
1999 when we
Okay, well, I
arrived in
think the
North
statute
Carolina.
of limitations is up on you being a transplant. So, yeah, okay, fair enough. All right. Well, regardless, we are both currently, and I certainly have been for about 20 years, North Carolina residents. And one of the things that we do is
Mhm.
notice when things are happening in our own state that are not just happening in our own state. So, well, like most, I hope, responsible voters, we pay attention to what's going on in our state, especially with education. We hope you do too. But one of the things that Lynn does for us is she takes a look at it and says, this is eerily familiar to things I've seen going on in other states,
Right.
or it's explicitly said, we're going to be testing this out for other states. So when you listen to this show today and we show you specific North Carolina, legislation, don't think, oh, well, that's just North Carolina, because that's not how it works.
That's
Anything
not
else
how
to add to that?
Yeah, that's not how the educated BS system works. It's not Vegas. It doesn't just stay in one place. It goes everywhere. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me, Deb, how people are thinking, oh, well, you know what? That bill sounds fabulous. But I learned a long time ago doing this kind of research that, the bill makes it sound really nice and cheery. And the exact opposite happens when you get in the language. You find out, oh, there are all these strings that were never alluded to in the title. So which is it? Is it going to be a helpful bill or is it going to be a bad bill?
Well,
Now remember,
for me, it comes down to this, Lynn.
right,
Any piece of what is a bill, right? It's a hopefully a future law for the people who wrote it, right?
right,
They want, I'm just a bill sitting up here on Capitol Hill. They want to go out of committee and get in and get signed and whatever. So these are wannabe laws.
right,
And what do laws do? They can only do one of two things. They can prohibit you from doing something. I would
right,
call, depending on what it is, or
right,
they can prohibit or limit the government from doing something to you. That's about it. And in our
right,
supposedly free republic that is supposedly protecting of our, inalienable rights, most bills really ought to be safeguarding our liberty, right? Right. Shouldn't we just be introducing
right,
laws going, oh, wait a minute. We didn't realize that government could go this far. So let's rein them in here and rein them in. Except usually they seem to go the other way, don't they? Where they're telling us what
right,
we're not allowed to do anymore. So my litmus test for any bill is, does
mhm,
this safeguard my liberty? Oh, it doesn't. Okay, it's bad. Like, I don't even get
right,
into the weeds of it. If I can read it and it's not explaining to me how
mhm,
it is safeguarding one of my basic liberties, which are spelled out in the Bill of Rights, if it's not
right.
doing that, it's bad.
Exactly,
Period. I don't need to know anymore.
exactly. Now, while
That's
these
it.
may be North Carolina state specific bills,
Yeah.
we have already stated, this is not just going on in North Carolina, but
Right.
let's remember that a lot of the funding that has been tied to these bills and these
Right.
people who are wanting to pass them through comes from the federal government. So
Right.
the federal government still has strings in your states,
Mhm.
even under the misnomer that somehow once it goes from the federal fund to the state kitty, that once it crosses that magic line, It's not Fed funded anymore. It absolutely is, because it still carries the
Well,
strength.
money's fungible too. So, I
Right.
mean, there are things they couldn't or wouldn't do in North Carolina if they didn't know the federal government was going to be handing them a pile of cash to do something else. If they had to fund
Exactly.
it all themselves and had to come to us and raise our taxes, whatever, it would be a harder sell than if they've
Mhm.
got, some money coming in or whatever. And even worse, if they're passing laws in your state with an eye towards pleasing Washington, right?
That's yep.
That, like
Mhm.
where they think like, ooh, the big boys in Washington will give us more money if we do XYZ and
Yeah.
do their bidding, then they'll pass laws on you. So this idea that somehow,
Mhm.
because there's a separation, that the states don't act as
Right.
if whatever, or because of, is just false, especially when it comes to education, but also other things. But we cover education here.
Right.
And then the last thing I want to add to what you said, Lynn, is that people also forget that just because we're in a state, we don't lose our civil rights. Like the Bill of Rights doesn't evaporate because you're in North Carolina and it's not the federal government acting on you. If you have freedom of speech, or you have freedom of association, or you have, the freedom to do certain things,
Right.
that doesn't stop because it's North Carolina, or even because it's a North Carolina government institution. It doesn't
Exactly.
stop.
Exactly. I'm so glad you said that, because by the time we're done, we're going to dive into one of the state departments, and we'll get into that. But I wanted to start with Senate Bill 48. And the reason I wanted to start with this is because this one is supposedly going to increase the number of activities that those who are outside the public school system can take advantage of. Now, the reason I wanted to start here is because back in 2013, when it first came up that North Carolina needed to update the homeschool laws, we already had 100% freedom. And part of the argument in Raleigh, in the General Assembly, was, well, you don't have access to sports. You don't have access to proms. You don't have access to, A, B, C, and D. And the very few of us who stood up and said, no, we already have those, we were kind of discounted. And then what happened was the changes to the law were made so that it overstepped homeschooling and married it to public schooling to a degree, because after all, we were so deprived of so many things. Well, here we are in 2025. Now that was 2013. Here we are in 2025, and the General Assembly is going, wait a minute, we gotta sweeten the pot here. So I'm going to read a few passages from here. I know you have the bill up, but I want to highlight a couple. And then, well, before I do that, let me go back, way back in the time machine here. Before my husband and family and I moved to North Carolina, we moved from Florida. And about that time, Tim Tebow was going to be the age enough to start playing football. But his parents had homeschooled he and his siblings for many, many years. And at that point in time, Florida didn't have a homeschooling sports league. Now, so they thought, well, we'll go down to public school and we'll get him signed up through their sports program. What they didn't bank on was the minute they did that, it created an umbrella. So you no longer had a lot of your homeschool rights. You now had to kowtow to this umbrella school that you were using to be able to participate. So you're giving up your homeschool freedom to go get into a public school sanctioned sports team so you can get accreditation so you could go on to become a college football star.
That's right.
I wanted to start with that because North Carolina already has a homeschool sports association. It is called the North Carolinian Home Education Athletic Commission, and it was established in 1998. So it's not like this is new stuff. All right. My question is, how will the existing homeschooling sports association be impacted by this law? And that's why I want to get into some of the language. Okay. So it says here, permit students who attend a public school, private school, or a homeschool without an interscholastic athletics program.
Well,
I
what
mean,
homeschool all by itself has an interscholastic homeschool program?
you know, and that's the thing. Interscholastic is going to tie to
That's right.
the next thing up, which is the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association. They've already sold out to Common Core and everything that goes with it. So there's that one. Interscholastic athletic program in a given sport or particular extracurricular activity to be able to participate in that activity at a public high school. So you have to ask yourself, is this, we're repeating what happened years ago in Florida, now we're bringing it to North Carolina? It goes on to tell you that the high school may charge you a reasonable fee for participation who is not, to the student who's not technically
So you're paying
enrolled.
twice. So you're paying twice.
Yeah, you're not technically enrolled in that public school, but you have to pay a fee to belong to the interscholastic program.
Even though you paid your taxes and you're not using it and no one's letting you opt out of paying for your kid's seat in that school, even though you're not using it.
Exactly. And it goes on to tell you that the local boards of education, Deb, will be able to regulate those fees and charges and solicitations. Now, what in the heck are we soliciting? It goes on to tell you that this will be by jurisdiction. So, in other words, school district. And let's see, the fees aren't going to come from the students, but they're going to come from the parents. Because after all, this is a public, private, or homeschool bill. So this is going to take more money out of the parents' pockets. All right. So again, we've already asked the question, how is this going to butt up to the existing absolutely state recognized homeschool athletic association? This is one to watch. And I dare you, especially with the rhetoric around school choice, and we've already done tons of shows on that, Deb, how the funds will go after homeschoolers and private schoolers and all kinds of other variations.
Well, the problem I have with this is they're using that lovely carrot of access. They love the word access. They took it from the left, and where people hear access and they think magical things happen when you're given access to something, and they forget to ask if the thing you now have access to is worth it, is even something you want. All right. So this idea that there are all of these kids who are just languishing away, not having access to sports because they're homeschooling first of all, it's false. It's not true. Secondly, because as you point out, there is a sports league, and most of the reasons people homeschool are more important on the priority list than, oh, my kid wants to play football. Tim Tebow is like an outlier. Okay.
Right. Absolutely. But he was used as the poster child for how umbrella schools could be such a great connection between homeschooling and public schooling.
But nobody asks, well, then if y'all are so concerned about kids having all the possible choices they could have, why are you not making public school an option, a public option? Why is it compulsory for everybody who isn't deciding to, specifically homeschool or pay for another school and has to let you know that they're doing it? In North Carolina, we have to let them know that that's what we're doing.
Exactly.
And it's still more free than other states, but it's still, we have to fill out all this paperwork and we have to have a high school diploma and all these things. And how come you're not letting the parents, if it's really so free and such an option, then why aren't you letting the parents not pay their school taxes in the first place? And people go, oh, you'll get it back in school choice. No, you didn't answer my question.
Exactly.
If I'm not participating by my choice, that is my choice, then why do I not have the choice to take whatever was my particular portion of school taxes, which ain't huge. It's not as much as y'all spend on my kid if they go to school, but I'll take it. I'll take my $3,000 back or whatever it is. Why can't I just have that money? Because then guess what I could do with that money? I could take that money to the homeschool sport program. And with me and other parents who actually want sports, what a great program we could have if we could fund it with our own money. But now you want to keep my money. You want to hold that hostage. You want to go, oh, by our good graces, we're going to let your kid come and pay more to join the program we already have that you already wanted to opt out of. This is not a boon to us. Like you said, it's just creating this umbrella that will then serve as a justification for checking in on the scholastic achievement, according to their definition of achievement, according to their definition of scholastic, for our kids.
Right. And don't think that those nationally normed tests will exempt your child if you're coming into a public high school and latching on to their existing sports program, because you absolutely will. And I've seen that happen in this state and in other states as well. So this is why I'm saying, if your state is so gung-ho on school choice, they're going to use these kinds of tactics to kind of sweeten the pot. So you'll go, oh, look at all this stuff that Johnny and Susie can have that they've never had before. And you know what? Here's my 2 cents on this. No mom or dad or guardian is going to sit there and say, okay, you want to play football, you want to go skating. All right, let's take a field trip. Let's go do it on our own, where we don't have to kowtow to a system. We don't have to tie into a system we don't trust, or we don't have to pay more to belong to that system.
I need to take a pause and apologize to the audience, and apparently to my child in the other room who is homeschooling, who says I am yelling.
Oh,
She says, you
okay.
have a microphone. I do have a microphone, and I
But
do some.
you're passionate, and there's nothing wrong with that.
That's
I,
all I'm
I,
saying.
yeah,
I'm very passionate about these issues,
so
so
am I.
I'll get a little fired up because
Uh-huh.
I don't think, well, like you said, people read the bills,
Mhm.
and if you read the language, an act to permit students who attend a public school, private school, or homeschool without a program. So the bill, they notice they lead with who attend a public school without a sports program. How
Yeah.
many schools in North Carolina, probably very rural, we're probably talking about schools that are very rural,
Hmm.
that don't have their own program, but they have one in their district? Well, guess what? Let me run you a special. They already are allowed to play sports with the nearest
Yeah.
program. That's not
Exactly.
new, but
That's
they
right.
put it in there to make it seem like, oh, we're just helping everybody. Private schools, same story. Most private schools, parents chose the school. If it
Yeah.
doesn't have a sports program, chances are the parents knew that when they selected it, decided to pay for it, and they didn't
Hmm.
much care. Okay. They weren't like, oh, bummer. They chose the school accordingly because most private schools do have their own interscholastic sports program. So again, this is really about homeschool kids.
It
This
sure
is
is.
really not about the other public school kids, the other private school kids. Really isn't. This is about the homeschool kids, because homeschool kids, with the exception of the association you mentioned, are the largest population of kids who don't have access to an interscholastic. But again, that was part of the parents' choice
Yep.
when we chose to homeschool. Life's about trade-offs, Thomas Sowell says.
Right.
And, before everybody is, but don't you think it's not fair? No, I don't, because these are the trade-offs. I think
Hmm.
it's unfair that I'm compelled to pay for a thing I chose not to use. That's unfair. I don't think it's unfair that my kid doesn't have access to play sports at that thing. I think it is grossly unfair for them to pretend they're doing her a favor to say
Yeah.
she can come and pay extra to do it.
Well, this also doesn't address the unintended consequences, Deb. Let's say that you've been homeschooled all your life and you enter into one of these high schools. Are you ready for the harassment, the bullying, the sheer just I'm better than you are attitude that will come from the public school students to the homeschool students? How, those are not woven into this. But I tell you what, you think back to high school, no matter where you are, and there was always somebody who was new and they got raked over the coals. Maybe it was just, oh, well, you dress funny or you look funny
Well,
or,
that's it. But
yeah,
Lynn, that's a decision the parents are going to have to make. I can't
I
really address that
understand.
because it may be an unintended consequence. But the bigger issue to me is
Mhm.
what people need to understand is there are people out there who currently have chosen not to homeschool,
Right,
in part because their kid plays a sport. I talk to them every day.
right.
They're like, well, my kid's a big baseball player, football player, so we've got to go to the school. I genuinely believe that things are getting so bad academically that a fair few parents are deciding, you know what, kiddo, your sport's important, but you're never going to the major league. You're not going to the NFL. So
Right.
it's more important that you be homeschooled, but they're still teetering on the fence. I think
Yeah.
they're appealing to those people to
Mhm.
go ahead and homeschool. You can still play the sport. Secondly, they would love nothing more to get a whole crop of new, I'm going to put it in quotes,
Yep.
homeschoolers who
Mhm.
are really not homeschoolers. They're just virtual schoolers. They're people
Yeah.
who are staying home, and because the ultimate goal, in my personal opinion, of
Mhm.
the school choice movement is to get almost all the kids in America virtual schooling on computers, either from a building that's warehousing them and has a monitor and they're all hooked up to like monitors and stuff like that and
Mhm.
wearables and things of that nature,
Mhm.
and they'll have very few human teachers, or they're
Yeah.
sitting at home so they don't have to pay for the buildings except for whatever. But you'll go to the building for your sports, you'll go to the
Yeah.
building for your healthcare, you'll go to the
Yeah.
building for all the other things, and the
Mhm.
school will become a community center, and
Yep.
it isn't going to be a school like anyone would recognize at all, because the
Exactly.
ultimate thing they want is what's going to come back out of your kid, not what's going into your kid, and that's data. So I think
Mhm.
this is just one of those teeny tiny little baby steps in the
Mhm.
direction of, let's make it easier
Yeah.
for a higher percentage of people who otherwise wouldn't make the hard choices that we've
Right.
made to
Yep.
go ahead. Go,
Exactly.
it's okay. Go ahead and homeschool. Go ahead. We'll keep your money anyway, by the way, but fewer kids to teach.
Yep.
Okay. And
Exactly.
you can come back and use this for this and use this for that. And it's just one little, they're just inching forward to the notion that the school is the provider of your things and not a place where children go to get educated.
Exactly. It absolutely is. I couldn't have said it better. So thank you. Well, we're going to move on to House Bill 82. Now, this one is going to set up a study commission for the local education agencies' size. And it's going to pick on the 5 largest local school districts in our state. Now, the reason why I want to harp on LEAs for just a moment is because local education agencies don't necessarily mean your school or your school board. Uh, your church can become an LEA. Your after school Satan club can become an LEA. Your any community service that somehow ties to either education, healthcare, or labor can be recognized as a local education agency. This was set out in the Every Student Succeeds Act because we had to have more public-private partnerships. We had to get everybody in the community wrapped around Johnny and Susie, because without that community, Deb, there's no way on God's green earth that the student is going to succeed. So, with that said, what are the biggest school districts in North Carolina? We have Wake County, that's the state capital for those of you who don't know. Then we have Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. We are the second largest city in the state. Then we have Guilford County, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and lastly, Cumberland County. So let's see, that would be, Guilford would be, stuff. Is that Greensboro? I think so.
Guilford County?
Yeah, I think it
I
is.
think it is, yes.
Yeah, and then Winston-Salem is Forsyth. Cumberland is going to be, I believe it is Fayetteville. Every one of these cities is on board to become a smart city. So why are we studying these particularly large school districts? Because the commission that will be appointed, not elected, and it's going to be appointed by the General Assembly. They're going to need 2 people from the General Assembly. Then they're going to need 2 people from local boards of education, and then 2 members who will be recommended by the Department of Public Instruction. Now, again, every one of these people will be cherry picked. So, what side of the fence are they going to be on? And what is the purpose of the study? It is supposedly to see if, being that large, there are no negative consequences that could possibly impact large student populations. Now, here's my guess as to what this is really hiding is, first of all, they're appointed, not elected. Second of all, they're going to receive per diem travel costs. So taxpayers are paying one more time for something like this. It's going to tell you that this study commission is going to go on long enough that if there become vacancies, they can be filled with whomever the political gurus deem necessary. Now, again, here's what I think is going on. If you look at the smart cities and you look at the regionalism and the opportunity zones that North Carolina and other states have already put into place, sometimes they're called prosperity zones, sometimes they're called inclusion zones. You can play with the words all you want, but what this is setting up is, well, if we are having our smart city, we can't travel 15 minutes out of that. So we have to separate these large districts into smaller districts so that they can be more micromanaged. And if you think I'm smoking dope, go look up regionalism, because every one of the FEMA regions that we have in the United States are an exact copy of the United Nations region that we are being split into.
Well, my question is, why do we need a study to find out the obvious? No, I mean,
guess,
like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, first of all, that LEAs, period, of any size,
right?
have failed. They have failed. I'm old enough to remember when they were created in the first dang place. Okay.
Right, right.
And by every metric, education in North Carolina has gotten exponentially worse and more expensive, I might add, since they were
Exactly.
established. So now they were going to have a commission to study whether they have any negative consequences. Open your flipping eyes.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
blatantly obvious. The statistics tell the tale. We don't need to fund and
Right.
empower a commission that is then going to create vacancies, which is going to empower the governor or whomever to appoint more loser political appointees to go and do more micromanaging of what's already a bloated budget, what's already top heavy with administrators. Since they created those LEAs, North Carolina, the numbers of administrators in
Yeah.
school districts have ballooned, have exploded,
Right.
even as they're sitting there telling us we have a teacher shortage.
Well, a couple of points here. First of all, LEAs were given a power increase as well as state-led LEAs, because it's supposed to be local and then it's supposed to be state-led. Both of them were given power increases across the nation, not just in North Carolina, under the Every Student Succeeds Act, and they kind of loosened up what was going on. Another point, you can look at small school districts and see negative outcomes for students. It's not just the large ones, it's across the board. And you're right, we're throwing more money at education, being told we have a teacher shortage. But you know why the administration has ballooned? It's because of the in-house, in-school myriad of increase in social workers, behavioral therapists, mental health, behavioral health, you name it. And administrative costs take up the lion's share of whatever funds come from the federal government as well as the local taxpayer.
Well,
But
they're also predicated on the premise that kids can't learn
yep,
without all these supports.
exactly. Because Johnny
When
and Susie have
there's
to have wraparound services.
we've said it 100 times on the show.
Yep.
There is zero, and I mean zero evidence whatsoever. Go find it.
Yeah.
That a student cannot learn unless it has a counselor, a social worker, a caseworker, a this worker, or that worker, or all the. That's, in fact, I would argue that those people get in the flipping way.
Yeah, they
Those
do.
people plant the idea in the child's head that their trauma, their childhood adverse situation, whatever, makes it so they can't learn, and they get stuck there. And all of this is just a jobs program for people who graduated college with these degrees. They have the society doesn't need them. We don't need that many of them. So they're using the giant pot of money that's associated with education and the big fat lie that you need to be all massaged and perfect in order to learn, in order to create jobs for people who otherwise would not have a job.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my goodness. Okay. We are moving on. The next one is going to be House Bill 87. And this title is Cell Phone Free Education. Now, this says it is supposed to restrict student use of cell phones in public schools.
Why do we need a law for this? Can I, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you go right ahead.
Okay. Parents since COVID have been even before COVID, have been begging schools, school boards, etc., to reinstitute a sensible disciplinary plan where you actually punish infractions, you suspend people, you expel people. But ever since Obama, that's been off the table. We can't suspend people. We can't punish people. We have to have restorative justice, all this stuff.
Right.
So, we can't discipline bad, distracting, disrespectful behavior when it occurs. But we now need a law that's going to restrict the behavior of everybody. This is, to me, this is right up there with you can't have a gun because a bad person did something bad with a gun.
Yeah. And I get it. But if you're establishing a study commission about negative outcomes, look at the number of children who have a cell phone. Maybe they have a special need and that cell phone needs to be with them so they could contact mom and dad when there's a seizure or when, they're whatever. Then think about just the fact of most of the children who have cell phones are already responsible enough. But also think about this. Let's say there's something really horrible going on in the classroom and someone takes out their cell phone and they take the whole thing. Maybe it's a teacher abusing a student. If you limit that from getting out, people who pay taxes don't really know that teacher X is beating up on students, because after all, if the students just say, hey, I saw teacher X do this, well, where's your evidence? You got to have evidence. Well, that cell phone footage would be that evidence. We're talking about now infringing on First Amendment rights. And North Carolina is not the only state with this kind of bill on the table. Texas, South Carolina are the two that come to mind, but there are others as well, because they think somehow this is taking away from how they're being educated. They're not being educated right now to read and write. We've got children from Connecticut and other locations who are graduating, Deb, and they can't read and write. And a cell phone didn't have a darn thing to do with it. It was how they were taught or supposedly taught.
Well, because I know there'll be people in the audience who say, but, there are kids who are out there filming fights and doing all this, and they're sitting on their phone in class, whatever. Let's be very clear. Every single classroom in America at this point, the kids are on a one-to-one device.
Exactly.
They're not using books and paper. Okay. So just get that out of your head. They're already on a device. These kids know how to use those devices and hack around those devices to do what they want without their cell phone. So let's just be clear on that. Yeah. To the extent that they use their cell phones in the hallway or in places where it's not instructional time, this bill wouldn't even cover that. So this is about instructional time.
Yes.
You don't need a law. Look, I'm not saying the kids should be allowed to use their cell phone during instructional time for non-instructional purposes.
I agree.
And everybody agrees with that. But what we're saying is, when did teachers and when did schools become so infantilized that they can't simply enforce proper rules of decorum and respect and proper behavior in a classroom without the long arm of the government, Big Brother, coming down and saying, you better have a policy that we approve of, or else you're falling, foul of the law. This is crazy. Why do I not see a bill saying you will have a policy of taking violent children and removing them from the classroom? I am much more concerned that a school doesn't have a policy to protect the civil rights of its students from violent assault than that they can't have a cell phone. Why is this the priority?
And that begs the question, what is the ulterior motive? I would say any state that has this on their docket, watch, because what they're telling you is, it's supposed to be a cell phone free education, but there's more to this. This bears investigating. It really does. This bears watching and being diligent, because here's the other fact of the matter. This goes after a personal cell phone, but it does zero for the school assigned device that still tracks them and keeps up with them. So
yes,
what is really the goal here?
They don't want you owning anything. They don't want you to have your own window, eyes, ears, whatever, into the classroom.
Right.
And that's what I think the ulterior motive is, because if they're so concerned about classroom decorum and behavior and instructional time, then they would be passing laws first and foremost to get rid of restorative justice and start cracking down on violence, drugs, gangs, criminal activity in the classroom. They would absolutely do away with this horrific experiment that has failed, which is restorative justice. And I'm not
Yeah.
seeing the General Assembly even have a chat about that.
We should send them our interview we did on that, what was it, social justice for the sensitive soul? We should send that to them and say, what are you going to do about this? Because it ultimately fails. But that goes over into the social and emotional learning, which brings us to Senate Bill 77.
Okay, that's
School contracted health services. So now this is not school-based health services, Deb. This is contracted, meaning I'm going to enter into an agreement with an outside the school entity, public-private partnerships. Okay. Now, this one is an act to allow parent choice. There we go. There's that buzzword. Allow parent choice in nursing service providers required by an IEP or individualized education program.
Hey, Lynn. Hey,
Yes,
Lynn.
ma'am.
Parents already have a choice
I
in the
know.
person who provides their child with anything remotely like medical care. This is just saying that you guys can make a choice of who it is that will be affiliated with the school and the IP. So you know what that does? That gives the school and the state access to your kids' health records that they otherwise wouldn't have.
And it puts your choice under the school's thumb, because maybe you don't want to contract with the nurse they have. Maybe you want to go out and choose your own. And I
You do
know
that
that's
now.
I know that. And that's what is so dangerous about this language, because we're going to allow, government doesn't allow parents to be parents. Your creator did. It's an inherent right. It is not a government fundamental right, because fundamental rights can be taken away. Federal, local, or state, fundamental rights can be changed or taken away. Inherent rights cannot. So,
You know what they're also trying to get around? They're
what?
trying to get around the fact that if an IEP, if the kid has been assigned an IEP, and you notice the language says requires nursing services.
Yep.
Okay. That means the state's on the hook to pay for it, regardless of who you choose.
Yep.
Now, the thing they don't have right now is access to those records. That right now, the way it is, as I understand it, is now you might have to get a lawyer involved and so forth, but they just have to, you give them the bill, they have to pay for it. Like that's just how it is. If you don't like their provider,
Right.
or if they don't have the provider that provides the services that your kid needs and they have a legit IEP, you go get the services and they have to pay whatever portion of that the law says they have to pay.
Right.
If
And
they
just for
pass this law,
Mhm.
they pass this law. Now you get to choose, but it's likely going to be from a list of approved people
Approved
that
providers.
are approved providers that are going to meet their pricing, needs, and
Mhm.
that are going to ideologically be aligned with them. Things like, oh, but you get to choose your prison. I mean, you're a nursing person.
Well, this goes right in with the illusion of choice with school choice funding, because you think, oh, goody, I get my money back, but then it's no, you can only choose from this predetermined list of providers of services. You can't
That's right.
go to whomever you want to.
It
This one,
says right here, item 4.
yeah,
The nursing agency employing the parent choice of nurse meets all standard contract terms required for any other nursing agency contracted by the local educational agency, including licensing and liability. What if the person you want to provide these services doesn't want to spend the money to get all of those things, but at the same time provides your child with the appropriate services and so on? Or they move the goalposts and add some new thing that the
hmm
nurse has to get, and your actual choice of person isn't going to
just
do that. Now you're stuck with the choices that they have. This is all of these things, you guys, are ways of increasing your dependency on
on
the
government.
school to raise your child, to the point where we already have parents who go, I can't raise my own kids because I can't afford to. I need the school, right? 100 years ago, an
Mhm.
American parent would never have uttered those words. Even though schools existed,
Right.
they never would have said anything along the lines of, I can't because whatever. People today act like they literally won't be able to raise their own children without using the school.
Well, and they've been indoctrinated with that thought that they can't. And my grown children grimace every time that I say it now, but it really drove home a point when they were much younger, and that was can't, couldn't, because can't didn't try. Now I realize there are limitations, but can't is the wrong word. If
Can't, never could.
yeah, um, I might not have the ability, but that's not can't. Can't is almost like a willful, I'm not even going to try. And the thing about this is it's still going to uphold it's going to try to use the clause from the state constitution that says, well, every child has access to a free, appropriate public education. Well, appropriate in whose eyes? The parents or the LEA or the state constitution? I'll bet you donuts to dollars the appropriate is going to be in a government definition, not a parent definition. This also is not written in, but it's also going to require omnibudsman. And if you don't know what that is a liaison between government and families when it comes to IEPs. So whose side is the omnibudsman on? Who's paying them? Is it the parent, or is it the state, or is it the federal government? This is Pandora's box as far as I'm concerned, and here's why. And I'm sorry, this just came out today. It was oh goodness, it was a press release from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. This is from the federal government. I'll be sure to send the link to Deb so she can put it in the archives for you. But this is telling you that we've been using CHIP, which is Children's Health Insurance Programs. That was woven into the Title I funding and other funding through the Every Student Succeeds Act that was recalculated so that the schools could double dip into Medicaid. Now, if we, the people, double dip into Medicaid, we're guilty of a felony, but our federal government does it through the states, and it's okay. So they've been having what's known as health-related social needs. They started this a few years ago. This press release is saying they're rescinding that because they're updating the framework. And I've looked at the questions on the framework, and it's an adult level of the adverse childhood experience survey that we have talked about before, which is, does anybody home beat you? Do you see mom and dad doing drugs? Does somebody take you to church when you don't want to go? Has anybody ever touched you in the wrong place? Well, this particular health-related social needs doesn't just stop at a childhood age. It goes all the way up to adulthood.
Right.
And it tells you that they're using this health-related social needs, which involves education, and we'll get to how in just a moment. But if you got questions about it, don't go to the federal government. Oh, no, go to your state-led health-related social needs website, which I did. And here we go, Deb. This is it right here. Okay. And like I said, this is one that I just found today. I did not have time to get it to you before this, but I will make sure that you get this. Mm-hmm. This is from the Healthy Opportunities, as the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services calls it. Now, listen to this. All North Carolinians should have the opportunity for health. Duh. That opportunity begins where people live, learn, work, and play. It begins with our families, neighborhoods, and communities. So by investing in the health and well-being of all North Carolinians, or insert your state, because the press release just said this is in all 50 states, we are investing in the health and activity and the vitality of our state. We're being a good citizen, aren't we, Deb? Okay. I'm going to move on.
I just, I think the part that really frustrates me, Lynne, is how many people will hear this stuff and say, what is y'all's problem with this? This sounds good. Like, don't you want our government to invest in us? Whatever. Like, well, it really comes down to, do you think you spend your money better than the government spends it allegedly on your behalf? And then also, that's if you believe that it really is on your behalf. And how do they know what's on your behalf? How do they know you so well?
They don't care about your health. They care about your data. Absolutely,
They
they
just
do.
care about power. It's all a means to
It's about
power.
control, and data's the new oil. It's the new cash cow. That's why we have to rope in the entire community, why we have to micromanage mom and dad, why we have to go after the homeschoolers. This is just absolutely off the chart stupid. And people, yes, they'll think, oh, this is good. But here's one shocker. Neither the Department of Education nor the Department of Health and Human Services at a federal level were ever supposed to be in control. That was supposed to be left to the states. So why in the name of all that's holy are we getting a press release from a federal agency or the arm of a federal agency, because this is housed in Health and Human Services? Are we
Right.
getting a press release that says, we're doing this on a federal framework, but talk to your state? I'm going to read a little bit more from this because this is absolutely stupid. The overall health. Oh, wait a minute. No, research shows that up to 80% of a person's overall health is driven by other social and environmental factors, and behavior influenced by them will be called social detriments of health, or SDOH. So now the government's telling us, well, you're a social detriment to health, or you have this. It's almost like they're telling you you have a disease you don't. All right, here are some of the conditions: food insecurity, housing instability, unmet transportation needs, and interpersonal violence. Well, I said this was going to tie to education. So far, you haven't heard that word, but wait, it gets better. All right, here we go. More than 1.2 North Carolinians cannot find affordable housing, and 1 in 28 of our state's children under the age of 6 are homeless. North Carolina has the 8th highest rate of food insecurity in the United States, with more than 1 in 5 of our children living in food insecure households. Well, right off the bat, we have children under 6. We have 1 in 5. So we're going to set up more government run. Let's feed them. Let's house them. Let's take care of their mental health and adverse childhood experiences, because trust me, that was coming next. Nearly a quarter of North Carolinian children have experienced adverse childhood experiences, including physical, sexual, or emotional abuse or household dysfunction. Again, the snooping assessments tied to the adverse childhood experiences was hatched up by the Centers for Disease Control, as well as Kaiser Permanente, a huge, big insurance, big pharma group that wants to control how our children are raised. So we have to come up with strategic interventions and investments, Deb. We have to partner with local community groups and healthcare providers. We have public-private partnerships that are developing innovative approaches for knitting together healthcare systems and communities. Now, let me pause here, why this is so important. Before Charlotte Iserbeat died, she heard one of the interviews that I had done, and I don't remember which show, but she personally snail mailed me a 74-page document. We've talked about it before, where North Carolina was used as the test dummy for the entire nation on how to usurp parental control over a child's health, weave it into the community in the name of healthcare. And here we're seeing it in living color. But everything's okay in North Carolina. There are other things in here. It goes on to tell you that they're going to test pilot non-medical interventions, evidence-based science as well. They're going to use philanthropic organizations, healthcare, community partners, and the state. Because here's the closing sentence so that you can say, we believe that together we can create a healthier, more educated, and economically competitive North Carolina. And now you can say your thought.
I'm just the same place I've been for months, Lynn, and that is that I really don't like to judge people.
Right.
And I certainly don't judge people who truly don't know. Let's say they don't speak
Right.
English, they're brand new here, whatever.
Right.
But anybody who claims to care about education sufficiently that they're paying any attention, who still sends their child to a public school in this or any other state, I think they're insane. Like, I mean, a genuinely believe they cannot claim ignorance. They cannot claim it's going to be fine. They cannot claim they have to do it. They can't. This is your child.
Right.
This is your child. Like, what is more important? There are people, I mean, whatever someone's opinion about it, mass migration, immigration might be, but let's at least respect one thing about some of the people who are risking everything to come here with their kids. Okay. They're risking everything, leaving everything they know behind.
Even families.
Even family, everything, to come here for a better shot for their kids. And we got American citizens sitting here saying, I can't because reasons. And I'm not even talking about homeschooling, you guys.
Yeah, across the board. Yeah.
I'm talking about leave. Figure out the school part after that. If you got 5 of your friends together who all felt the same way you do, you have a school now. Find another 5 friends in your neighborhood. Where, like, our problem in America is the government has done such a great job making us dependent on them and not each other.
Yeah.
That we don't have real community anymore. And we see the school as our community. We don't talk to our neighbors. We don't know our neighbors, most of us. And if you live in an urban or urbanized area, you for sure don't know your neighbors. And they have us, in spite of living on top of each other, we're isolated from each other. And that means we cannot figure out how to solve our own problems without government. And the key, here, the proof of it, you look at what happened in Western North Carolina. Government totally failed those people. Who came to their aid? Other humans, other Americans, the Amish, farmers from as far away, West Virginia, Ohio, Tennessee. People were coming from all over the place, bringing food for livestock, building homes, lumber, electrical generators, you name it, healthcare, nurses. People were showing up in droves. That's the American way. That's the America that I would consider great.
Right. And that's the way it was supposed to be. Government was never supposed to usurp that. And it's an absolutely crying shame because, when the government found out, hey, private citizens are doing this, we have to shut them down. We can't let that happen.
That's right.
Anyway, well, that's all the poop on the scoop I have for you, my dear.
Well, I got nothing else to say. I'm like I said, I really hope people will watch this and digest this and before you give in to the urge to say, oh, these ladies are paranoid, like I said at the outset, ask yourself why these things need to be laws. So looking at the first one, why do we need a law to permit people to participate in something they chose not to participate in? So it's obviously for a new crop of people. It's for a new population of people who don't exist yet. And then ask yourself, why would the government in North Carolina want to create a new incentive for people to make that choice who otherwise wouldn't make it? Because that's really what's going on here. Secondly, on the next bill, why are they making rules about cell phones and wanting the schools to have these policies or else against cell phone usage during instructional time when most schools either already do have such a policy or they'd happily implement one if they had the teeth in their disciplinary plan to enforce it. So coming up with a plan isn't going to solve any damn problem except possibly giving the school now a new permission they don't currently have, which is to physically lay hands on your property.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous. And then the last one, of course, with the letting you choose, again, you have the option to do that now. You just have to jump through some legal hoops to do it. They don't currently have the right to choose their own nurse if you're going to want to do it inside the school. But by allowing you to do it through their list and all that, they're just giving you more of their choices. That's all. They don't want you to leave the school to make that choice. They want you to feel more inclined to choose one of their approved choices. Exactly. So these things permit, allow, etc. It's all trickery.
It's wordplay. It is. And one thing I want to point out, when you get the archive of the Centers for Medicaid Services and this health-related social garbage, think about the last time you went to the doctor or your child went to the doctor. The questions when you read them, I got one of the last times I went to the doctor, and it was, do you feel like you have enough to eat? Do you feel depressed? Are you concerned about you have a place to live or how to pay for it? I can remember a myriad of doctor visits when I was coming up and raising the children. Those were questions that were never conceived to be asked in the doctor's office. What was asked was, how do you feel? What are your symptoms? How long has this been going on? That's where it should stop. But because of this overall, we got to police everybody and get in their business no matter where they go, has got to stop, because it's an invasion of our privacy and our civil rights. It's none of the government's business how I feel about where I get my food from. Because as you pointed out, when push came to shove, other people stepped in to help. Help will always be there, but it's not going to be there from the government, because when the government says help, you should run.
That is for sure. That's the best way to end it, as that I can think of. And I hope you'll ping me again when you find some more stuff. But this is just
I absolutely will.
getting bleak. and I'll just reiterate to the audience that please go watch the show I did with Jake Kleisek about the Trump plan and Project 2025 and all of that, because whatever you might think of Trump, or whatever you might think, whatever you might think of his foreign policy or some other specific policy, I'll go on record as saying I genuinely don't think the man has a clue when it comes to the nitty gritty of what's going on in his education policy. I think he's just repeating a bunch of stuff that he's been told to say because his interests lie elsewhere. And if there's one thing that has always bugged me about him, is if he isn't interested in it or isn't a thing that he already knows about, he has exactly zero curiosity to learn about it. He just picks people who he thinks are smart about that thing. They persuade him, usually through like really superficial characteristics, that they're the guys to go to, that they've got their finger on the pulse of what America wants. And right now, I'm sorry, but America has been lied to so much about this topic that they actually don't know. And I think he's just offloaded that, because there's no question that Linda McMahon just spewed back Project 2025 talking points in her confirmation hearing. And nobody can sit here and tell me, but it's not Trump's plan. Maybe it wasn't, but it's Heritage's plan. And Heritage got him elected, or helped get him elected. And they're in the door now in the form of Linda McMahon.
Yeah.
And Penny What's-Her-Face.
Right. And I will just say that if you have not gotten John's book, School World Order, I would highly suggest go to his website, get that book, because if you want to have your jaw drop about just how toxic the global plan in education has been and is continuing to be, you'll get an absolute overload of information. And the nice thing about it is that John's one of my personal friends, and he and I have done interviews together. We've talked on the phone, and he was like a son to Charlotte Iserby, and he was blessed after she passed to inherit so much of her research. So just putting in a plug for John.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would agree with that. I would 100% agree with that. Well, Lynn, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it, as always. And everybody, please like, share, and subscribe. Go check out Lynn's own website, CommonCoreDiva.com, where you can read all of her articles and deep dives into all of these topics going back many, many years.
Yes, more than I care to admit.
And of course, we have a playlist of all of our shows together, and many of them, they're all evergreen. There's nothing in there that we covered however long ago we covered that isn't just ahead of its time. It's now, whatever we talked about is probably hitting your district or has already hit. So familiarize yourself with that. If you were under the impression that this election fundamentally changed things for you or your child, I'm sorry to disabuse you of that notion, but that is not the case. It is full steam ahead with state-run education and under one giant umbrella, and school choice is only going to make that worse.
Yes. Thank you, Deb.
You're very welcome. Thanks.